So today we're going to take a look at an advanced economy guide, and what I'm talking about is some specific scenarios where you probably actually are doing the wrong thing, or at least what a pro player would think, or a lot of pro teams and how they view the game. And it really started with this, which is from runitback.gg, and essentially it's talking about the hero rifle and why saving is pretty good, particularly saving two guns is quite good because your stats of winning those 2v5s are very much not in your favor, but saving and then buying with the rest of your team can be very, very helpful indeed. And so here are some of the statistics, and here we go for the attacking sides against the full buy of defenders. You can actually see that being almost full, having 3 or 4 Vandals, as they call them, Phantom or Vandals, is enough. You will actually win. I mean, in this data set, they actually won more rounds than they did with a full 5 Vandals than anything else. So you actually win more being almost full, which is probably just a statistical quirk, but it shows that it's within the range. You know, it's about the same if you just have a couple of full rifles as you would with full rifles. And the same is true to even a more extreme degree on the defensive side, because you only need 2. You see the win rate jump from 39% here of just having 1 to 2 here. Having 2 rifles is absolutely massive. And actually, again, having just 2 rifles and then specters and judges and filling with the rest of your team, whatever else it might be, actually was the most successful. Now, this isn't a massive sample size of rounds here, but still, it goes to show it's about the same. It's on par with the rest, and so you don't really need full rifles, full shields for everyone to be successful in this game. Now, this data was taken quite a while ago at this point, patch 2.07 and 2.06, so this is after the Bucky nerf. So we're talking like, you know, 9 months, almost a year ago, somewhere in that range at this point, but it still is going to be true. And this kind of data has really led teams in a different direction when it comes to how they think about the economy in Valorant, and a lot of teams have become more aggressive. And I really started to notice this around the time of Champions, where teams seem to be buying a lot more. There was a lot more rounds of 3 or 4 rifles and a Spectre and heavies and things like that. And you see a lot of rounds now in pro play where 3 people have full rifles and heavy shields, and then the other 2 players are just filling with as much as they can. And that can be on both sides depending on how the game is going. If it's a back and forth game, you can get both sides doing that at the same time competing in these rounds, because basically teams have realized that you just want to win rounds. That's the most important thing. And if the data says we don't need a full buy to have a good chance of winning a round, then they're going to go for it more times than not, because it just makes sense. Because if you don't need that full buy, you should be trying to win as many rounds as you can. And Valorant is a pretty snowbally game for the most part. There does seem to be a bit of a momentum base to it, where if you can win a couple rounds in a row, you know, your chances of winning the next couple rounds are also a bit higher. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of scenarios, and these are quite interesting, and I want to honestly think about what you do in these situations. So scenario 1 is you are attacking and have lost the pistol round, but you've managed to plant the spike and maybe got a couple kills in the pistol round as well between your team. What do you buy for round 2? And at the bottom I just have a reminder of how much money you will get. So you get the first loss round bonus of 1900, you get 300 for the whole team for planting the spike, and any kills gain 200 for the person that got those kills. So what would you do? And I think the default answer for a long time for pretty much everyone, whether you're playing in Iron or whether you were in a pro game, was we're going to save and we're going to play for round 3. We'll accept that round 2 won't be our round. We'll get to round 3 with our full utility, full rifles, full shields, and go from there. But I particularly started to notice a different around the Champions tournament. That kind of time was when a lot of pro teams started buying up on, in this exact scenario where they lost the pistol but planted the spike, they really started to buy up more often than not. And Crew in particular, you might remember the run that Crew went on, the LATAM team in the World Championships, you know, got to the semi-finals. They won a lot of rounds doing exactly this, where they would force up on that second round, and they won a lot of them. And, you know, they were really good at them, and they won a lot. And that meant that they then were able to often win the third round, and it almost became the case that they were then the team that won the pistol round, right? They'd go into the 4th round in like a 50-50 round, and they were 2-1 up at that point. So it was almost as if they had won the pistol round. And I just want you to remember that if you win the pistol round, at least at the pro level, if you win both pistol rounds in a game, you have about an 85% chance of winning that match. That is an absurdly high number percent to win a game of Valorant just from winning 2 key rounds. And so it just goes to show that, this can be a strategy that can go pretty well for you. And just to give you some idea here, this is what your economy might look like after you've planted the spike but lost the first pistol round. So in this scenario, this is when you've perhaps got 3 kills, and each of player 1, 4, and 5 got a kill. Player 3 and player 2 did not, but they might have something looking like this, right? Where player 1 has 2,500, which is enough to buy a Spectre, light shields, and full utility. And that goes obviously the same for player 4 and player 5. And then the players who didn't get kills have enough to buy a Spectre, light shields, and some utility, or maybe a marshal or a sheriff, full shields and full utility as well. So 2,200 is the minimum a player can have when you plant this spike. And Spectre Lights versus Spectre Heavy, or particularly Marshal Heavy, which a lot of people, will go for on that second round, is a very winnable round. And if you then win it, as I said before, you will be likely to win round 3 as well and be in a good position going in to round number 4. But of course, this is a very risky strategy, because if you lose, that means that you'll probably have to save round 3 and you'll probably start 3-0 down. So this is a very risky strategy, and I'm not saying that this is always the right option in this case, because there are a lot of pro teams that never do this, and some that do it very rarely as well. So this isn't you should always do this. I think that this is a situation where if you feel comfortable attacking on a certain map, and you feel like, there's something that you can exploit, or there's something that, you feel confident with yourself, then this is the time to go for it. If you're on a map where you don't feel confident on the attack side as much, then I would say don't go for it. And of course, always buy with your team. If you're in a solo queue and you suggest maybe doing this and your team just doesn't respond to you and just saves instead, then of course, go with your team. That will always be the better option. But I do want to give you some examples of this kind of extreme way that the pro game has changed in terms of the economy, because here we have exactly the situation that I just laid out to you, where DRX are on the attack side of Haven here. This is the VCT Korea Grand Final, so the qualification game for Iceland for DRX versus Onslayers. DRX have lost the pistol, but they've planted the spike. They actually only got 1 kill. So in my suggestion, I was suggesting 3 kills, maybe even 4 kills. They've only got 1 kill, but they're still going for this force. And you can see here, we've got a couple Spectres lights and full utility. We have a Stinger here with full utility, and a Sheriff full shields and full utility as well. And let's take a look at this round, because it's going to go well for DRX. They are going to be rewarded. But then Onslayers follow it up with an equally, perhaps even more crazy thing that you rarely see Onslayers or any team do what they're about to do after this. But you see some nice utility usage. They get the first kills. As I said, this is a very winnable round, especially against a Marshal, as we saw there. And so we end up in a 5v2, and these Onslayers players, they actually save their Spectres. And because they save their Spectres, they then go into the very next round doing something equally as crazy, because they're then going to counter force onto DRX, because it was a pretty much flawless round, and DRX, they know that DRX aren't going to have any rifles. They're going to stick with their Spectres and what they've got with full utility. The side of Onslayers decide, well, we can match that. We can get close to that as well. So let's force up. We brought in 2 Spectres ourselves, saved from the last round. So they're going to go for it as well, which is, again, equally crazy, but they're just trying to win rounds, because winning rounds is how you win games of Valorant, not by saving money. So this time it actually doesn't go well for the side of Onslayers. They aren't going to win this round, and so that means it puts them in a bad position for round number 4 as well, which they then go on to lose as well. But I think this just goes to show you how willing teams are these days to really go in for something, to really go crazy at something, and just buy up probably a lot more often than you are in your ranked games. But now let's come to scenario 2, and this one is much more common, and this is one that you'll see a lot of times. And so this time you have won the pistol round. This can be on either side, and you've converted round number 2 after buying your Spectres / Marshals as well. Your opponents did not force on round 2, and so they in round 3 have full rifles and full shields. In round 2 though, 3 of your players died to their pistols, and so now they have a decision to either buy up or save with the team for round 4. What would you do? And I'm sure, again, most of you in this scenario would save for round 4. Let's all buy rifles in round 4. Again, round 3 might not be our round, but we'll just wait for round 4, play with our full rifles, and go from there. But again, this is almost certainly the wrong decision. Because here's the thing, unlike the first scenario where it's kind of a bit of a feel of how you're feeling about the game, you know, you planted the spike, are you feeling good about it? You know, it's a high risk, high reward scenario. This one to me is much more clear cut, where you should always be buying in this scenario. There isn't really an option, and it goes back to those statistics we saw at the start, where you don't need full rifles on everyone to have a good chance at winning the round. And so let's go through the scenarios, right? So let's say you save, you decide not to buy on that round 3, and then you win round 4. So things go your way. You get rewarded for saving, and so you saved round 3, you won round 4, which was like a 50-50 round, and congratulations, the score is now 3-1, and things are looking good going in to round number 5. Great. But let's say you buy and win in round 3. What happens then? So you decide to take that risk, you buy 3 phantoms or vandals as we call them, and you have the 2 specters from the round before as well, but you win that round 3, and so that puts you in a great position for round 4, because your opponents will be on a save again, so you'll likely win round 4 as well. And you have to remember, in that round 3, if you did win round 3 and your opponents have saved and they've got full rifles in that round, well, anyone with a Spectre is going to be able to pick up either a teammate who died or an opponent's rifle, and so you'll have full guns on round 4, meaning that likely the score will be 4-0, and again though, you'll be looking good going into round 5. So basically the difference if you win in either scenario is you'll be 4-0 up instead of 3-1 up, and so that looks pretty good. But I know what you're thinking. What happens if you lose that round and you forced? Well, let's take a look again at both scenarios. So you saved on round 3, and then you bought up for round 4, but you lose round 4, right? So you saved in round 3 and you lost with your bad weapons, and then you went and lost the crucial 50-50 round in round 4. This means that in the next round you're probably going to be on a save and will lose round 5 most likely as well, and that puts the likely score at 3-2 to your opponents before the next 50-50 round in round 6. But let's say you buy, so you go for that risky strategy and lose in round 3 because that's the one that you've bought for. So you tried the risky strategy, but alas, to no avail, you lost, meaning that round 4 will be a save, which you will also likely lose. That makes the score 2-2 going into the next 50-50 round, which will be round 5. So that is the point, that basically it's the same thing, but the score is 2-all rather than 3-2 to your opponents when it goes into that next 50-50 round where you both teams have a bye. It's just always a better scenario. Whether you win or lose, the better choice is to always buy in this scenario that you've lost quite a few players in that second round. You should always be buying up. And here is an example of just that, where Optic are going to be rewarded for being aggressive here, because they're playing as the guard, they're 2-0 up, as you can see here. This is in the grand finals of NA. They're 2-0 up, they won the pistol, they'd won the second round, but 3 players, as you can see here, have died in that second round to the guards' pistols. The guards have got their pretty much full rifles, full shields coming in, and what they are going to decide to do, Optic, is they are going to buy up phantoms and vandals, as you can see. Here we go, there are all the vandals coming in for the side of Optic, and they have, as we run this forward, they're actually going to get rewarded for doing just that, because Marv gets the first kill, FNS finds a kill, these Spectres are very good and will get enough kills. Victor gets another one there. All of a sudden we're in a 5v1 with this save. Victor, here you go, goes and picks up a gun because the opponent is going to have guns. It's that exact scenario I just talked about. They're going to get rewarded, and then as we go to the next round, the guard are going to take a timeout because they're worried about what they need to do for this next round because they keep losing. They're on a save. You have full rifles. Round 4 is yours. You're going into the next game 4-0 up, and they do just mow them down here early on, and Optic start this game 4-0 up because they took that risk, but it was always the right decision to take that risk, and they got rewarded for it, and a lot of pro teams have started doing this a lot more. No longer is round 4 the round that's kind of, you know, the first full gun round. Often it's round 3 now, where both teams will just buy up into round 3 and try and get those wins early on. And one of the key reasons why this kind of strategy is so successful, or can be so successful in Valorant, is because the guns in that tier below, the Vandal and Phantom, are quite good. You'll remember this patch. This was patch 4.0, where they made quite a few weapon changes to the Spectre. This is when they broke the Ares and would soon fix it again. But they also made changes to the Guardian and Bulldog. And here's the key thing. Aside from the Classic, which for how much it costs is the best gun in the game, The next best, I'm sure we can all agree, is probably the Spectre. The Spectre is an absolutely absurd gun that everyone picks. Now, it did get nerfed here, but clearly everyone is still picking the Spectre a lot of the time because it's just such a good gun. I would even suggest at the lower ranks, I would bet that most people's statistics at lower ranks is better on the Spectre than it is on, say, a Vandal, because it's much more forgiving as a gun, you know, for movement error and things like that. And it's just a really, really powerful weapon. So this is why it works, because the Spectre is really good. And with the buffs to the Guardian and Bulldog that we've seen as well, those guns are also very viable if you feel comfortable with them. The Bulldog in particular, I think, is perhaps the most underrated gun in the entire game, and we've seen more and more pro players start to use it because they're beginning to realize this Bulldog gun can go head to head with a Vandal or a Phantom. You know, if your aim is on, it can be absolutely fine replacement for those guns, and it's a very powerful weapon in the right hands. And then just to prove my point about the Bulldog, let's watch a clip from Durka. Now, is this going to happen for me and you? Probably not, but at the same time, it's just a good way of showing that the Bulldog, particularly at the top levels, is a very, very powerful weapon. And as we run this forward, Durka is going to manage to get the ace here. And interesting thing you might note is that the side of Guild, they don't have full weapons. This Judge here is something that Coldamenta has picked up. He actually started with a Sheriff. The reason is because they forced in round 2, because they planted the spike and they wanted to win that next round, because a lot of teams are now going for that strategy. But again, here you go. The Bulldog is a very viable weapon that you can use as well, and alongside particularly the Spectre and the Guardian, if you feel comfortable with that as well, it's about the same. You know, your chances of winning those rounds, as we saw from the statistics at the very start of the video, are about the same, if not even slightly better, when you have these other weapons. I mean, I don't even need to talk about the Judge. I'm sure that one speaks for itself, particularly on the defensive side. But even with these other weapons like a Spectre or a Bulldog, it's very viable to use those as well. And so you probably should be buying more often than you really think. So what are the overall takeaways? Well, 3 or 4 Vandals are as good as having 5 for most of the time. So if that is the case, and you can buy shields as well, you should be, as that last player or those last couple of players, be forcing up and buying as much as you can as well. If you won the pistol round, but round 2 didn't really go your way, then you again should be buying as much as you can in round 3 and trying to make that the round that you want to win. If you lost the pistol on the attack, but you did plant the spike and you're feeling confident about where your attacking side is on that map, then maybe you want to ask your team if they want to force and try and go for it in round 2 and try and get the kind of thrifty round back onto your opponents. But the key takeaway is always play as a team. Don't do anything of what I've just said if your team is not with you. Always ask your team if they want to do it first, because if they don't and you end up buying and none of your team does, that is a much worse situation to be in had you just saved. You're always better off playing with the team before you do any of this. So if your team doesn't say anything or doesn't agree, then just let it go and forget all the statistics, because you'll be better off playing as a team.